Hello, I've been advised there's some people who are a bit confused about things like how to record stuff on cassette decks and music centres and boomboxes and all that sort of stuff, all that good stuff that's around. And so I thought I'd do this video, just a quickie, just to clear up a few things so that you don't get stuck with all the naysayers telling you the stuff that isn't wrong, it just isn't right. I'll explain. I want to keep things simple. On the screen now you will see there are various music centres and cassette decks and more music centres. Well, there will be. There's a music centre and oh look, there's some music centres and there's some more music centres and these things were not cheap. You have to remember cassettes were normal, and what happens with normality is that you get run-of-the-mill, good, normal. There's nothing wrong with normal. So what happened was quite simply that they knew how to do it. Cassettes were good. Run-of-the-mill cassettes were adequate. They were, well, if you had a hi-fi, they were a hi-fi. But if you had a cheap old boombox, the sort of thing you'd just shove in your pocket, of course it wasn't as good as a Nakamichi Dragon. Nothing was as good as a Nakamichi Dragon. You couldn't even guarantee 2 Nakamichi Dragons would be as good as a Nakamichi Dragon, because they are so well made, they are so precise, they have very, very highly machined parts, and they have very, very carefully designed circuits which have to be tweaked, because what they're doing is they're trying to get blood out of a stone. They are trying to get the best out of a tape that is possible. Now, we all know about getting the best that's possible. It's a law of diminishing returns. That's why you could buy a good, at the time, £100 cassette deck, which would sound nice. Or you could spend £1,000 on a Dragon, which would sound very nice. But did it actually sound that much nicer? 10 times nicer. Bearing in mind £100 in those days was a lot of money. I saw a thing with a Ferguson shoebox recorder. When it was released, it was about £428 in today's money for a shoebox recorder. So, let's get this straight. The reason that there is a problem with fixed bias cassette decks is because they've decided to make one. Tapes are made to a standard, and the cassette decks are set up to a standard. That's all cassette decks, including music centres. They are set to a standard. Now, if your tape matches the standard that the deck is set to, no problem. But if you're trying to get the finest part of the last bit of the finest bit of ounce of detail out of a tape, obviously you're going to need to tweak for each one. And just a little thing like the tape being a different temperature will make a difference to whether you get the final ooh out of it. When I say ooh, I mean the ooh, that's just the last little bit. Oh, look, there it is. It's this final squeeze. And yes, it will make a difference, because if you've got a different amount of tape, if you've got a different thickness of tape, if you've got a different... There's going to be... You're not going to get the final last bit out with the standard setting. You're going to have to fine-tune it, like you would do with, I don't know, an F1 racing car. But just try and see this comparison here. If you've got an F1 racing car with an F1 racing motor, which looks a bit like this, and then you compare this to, say, a Mini. This is a Mini engine. This is a Mini Cooper engine, actually. You can see it's got twin carburetors. It's a semi-racing engine. It's a good engine. And you can see it in situ here. Now, what we've got there is a very good engine. But will that really worry about the last minor tenth of an adjustment on the valves? Well, it's only got the standard amount of valves, so no, it's not. But would that make a difference in a Formula One racing car, which has cost millions of pounds to make and develop? Well, of course it would. And that's the difference between the run-of-the-mill stuff and the stuff that you get like the Dragons. And the reason that the cheaper decks have got some form of bias adjustment on them is because they can. It was a sales ploy. I'm not saying it wasn't a worthwhile sales ploy, but it was a sales ploy to get people to actually use to buy their machine rather than somebody else's, because you can adjust the bias on it. When they started putting on auto bias, that was simple, nice and simple. just push the button. But did it make that big a difference? No, not to the sorts of decks they were putting them on. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a maker or breaker. It was just nice to have. Most people, if you've got a deck, a lot of them haven't got any test tones or anything. And if you go onto the net and ask how to set these things up, you will get people sending you, oh, you've got to have the oscilloscopes, you've got to have tapes, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, do the other. Well, why on earth would somebody sell you a deck with a knob on it, which you need all that equipment, which costs more than the deck, to be able to set the knob to the right place? Follow the instructions. But the fact is, the knobs are marked in plus and minus. And in the middle, which is where they normally end up, is where most of the tapes mostly work most of the time. And if you've got a tape that doesn't work in that area, guess what? It's a duff tape, and they do exist. Anyway, back to the story. If you've got yourself a standard cassette deck without bias adjustments, but you've got the switches on it so you can set it for the different types of tapes, you're laughing. You can get high quality recorders and you haven't got an extra button to fiddle with or press or whatever. It just works. And just to prove it, I've done a lot of tape recording just recently on a non-adjustable bias deck. And for your entertainment and edification, here are just a few bits of clip from different types of tape doing the same music, and you can just try and see if you can hear the difference. Or not, it's up to you. Anyway, there we go. We'll let that run. What I'll do is I'll stick these together with a little bit of a jump so you know they've changed. Where We Want to Go by Patricos, dynamic and clean. There we have 3 different tapes, 3 different types of recording of the same bit of music. So they were all recorded on the W1200. They were all recorded at the same level, and they were all played back at the same level. The fact that the Fuji is a bit louder is just, that's what the Fuji does. And that's all the difference it's going to make, is that the Fuji is just going to play back a little bit louder than the others. And all the rest of the tapes that you've seen on my channel, I've all been done on the same machine, set at the same levels, so you can compare one to the other. But at the end of the day, does it make a difference to you? Well, no, you record it at the levels that sound right. If you don't set it up right, it's not going to be right, no matter what you do with it. So there we go. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to play now the bit of classical music which was recorded on a run-of-the-mill Toshiba. See a picture, and it's a bit of organ music, and it sounds pretty damn good. No fiddling involved, just set it up and did the levels. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the direct feed so you can hear what the actual sound came out like from the recording, and then just as a bonus at the end I'll put on the original digital file, so if anybody's interested they can go and listen to it. In the meantime, if you'd like to subscribe or get some value from this and feel that it's worthwhile, put some comments or whatever, I'd appreciate it. And let's get stuck into the music. What now follows is the original digital file as downloaded from YouTube, which is there for your entertainment and comparison if that's what tickles your boat.